This is Minda Wilson with Urgent Care, and I'm pleased to welcome Roland Perez, one of the elder statesmen of healthcare broadcasting. Roland, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting.
And I meant elder as experienced.
Thank you. Yes, like they said, they introduced me as the father of healthcare television because I was in healthcare media and healthcare television before it was cool.
So how did you start?
We started, actually, we were just a type of fix-it PR firm, and we got a phone call from a hospital who had a major PR problem, not of any of their doing, but just an accident. And they wanted to get their doctors back on and wanted to get the hospital back on and wanted to just get good PR because they'd had a taste of bad PR. And so we did 13 weeks, and we did a show, and we came up with a show called American Health Journal. We got their doctors on, made it interesting. At the end of the 13 weeks, we were in the studio with all the executives of the hospital, and they said, no, we don't want to stop. We want to keep going. So
Wow.
I said, wow, really? And nobody was doing this. So we continued, and all of those young folks that were sitting in those chairs that were, minor executives and junior executives at the hospital chain, as time went on, they became senior executives, and their first phone call was to me. So we started doing one hospital after the other, all over the country until we have visited 110 hospitals. I've interviewed 7,800 physicians.
My goodness.
And we have, in the can of shows, we have 760 30-minute television shows in our content. So, we're at least, if nothing else, we have the largest amount of content on healthcare in the
Right.
world.
And I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes in healthcare.
I have, and I haven't. The technology has changed considerably. Obamacare changed things, but not as much as people imagine. But technology, especially in diagnosis and things like that, that has been that's had a big leap in and an improvement for medical science.
And the life of a doctor has changed, since you probably first.
They're making less money, if that's what you mean. Yes, the insurance companies have capped a lot of the expenses, so doctors are not making as much money as they were years ago. And medical schools are not seeing as many people in the profession, but the ones that are there now are there for the patient. They're not there for the career or the country club or the big car, because there really isn't a lot of that anymore. Everybody makes a very good living, but they don't make these millions of dollars that doctors used to make years ago.
And as that's changed, and as we've seen the change in insurance with Obamacare and stuff like that, there's also been an increased interest and awareness about healthcare. People are more interested in learning about it.
Yeah, the changes came when there were so many different regulations about getting to a doctor and selling a doctor or anything, or educating a doctor on anything. There was a lot of regulations came up because there were some people that were taking advantage of that. But what happened was that pharmaceutical companies were always had an entree into a doctor's office. They would walk in, they would see the doctor, and they would offer the doctor a free vacation or, stock in the company, or there was a lot of incentives that pharmaceutical companies used to have, a lot of leeway. Well, those things were stopped state by state. They stopped that sort of thing. So all that was left was some pizza for the staff. No more cruises, so pizza for the staff. And of course, they weren't getting to the doctors as much, and so business went down. So the pharmaceutical companies did the biggest thing they ever did and still ever did. They went to the public. So now when you watch the news or CNN or any particular program, what do you see? Ads for pharmaceuticals.
Interesting.
And they went directly to the public. And they said, this is what this drug does. If you have these symptoms and you are suffering from this disease, ask your doctor. They're not saying go to the pharmacy and get it. They're saying ask your doctor. So they're creating the need for their product through reaching the public and then going through to the doctor, instead of the old way of going to the doctor and then having the doctor tell the patient what to do. So that changed healthcare a lot. And so everyone got interested. Gee, that's interesting that this particular drug does this or that. And people started looking into their own healthcare. And there was an influx in wellness and complementary medicine and alternative medicine, and that sort of spurred on a lot of people wanting to know about their own health. And so that's where we are today, where we put out a story on PBS because we're a PBS show, and we're on streaming. We have 3 streaming channels.
Yeah. Now, what was that about? Because I mean, you've been on PBS for a very long time, and now you're offering the opportunity to see on. What was the transition? What inspired it?
More and more people. The cutting of the cord. An article yesterday in the paper showed a 32% cord cutting on cable TV, and where they're going is to streaming. Roku, Amazon, Peacock, Apple TV. That's where they're going, and that's a third. That's getting very close to a third of the entire market. So streaming came, and we started our first streaming channel called the American Health Journal. We now have over 500 videos, healthcare videos on the channel. Plus, we have a 24-hour-a-day streaming live series of shows that are running constantly on the channel. And that runs on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV. And it's been very well received because in Amazon Fire, we're number 1 in the country for healthcare.
That's amazing. It's exciting that people are interested in learning about healthcare. So what are your most popular shows? What are people most interested in? It's strange. People say, well, it must be heart or cancer, and it's actually not. The most calls, the phone rings here on Monday, and there's a lot of phone calls here waiting for us on Monday, and they're about your eyes, your feet, your skin, things that affect people immediately, and they're looking for answers. And eye care is probably number 1. Wow.
Because and hearing is very big. Skin cancer is bigger than any other cancer that we answer questions about. And amazingly, you run something on feet, bunions, and the phone will ring off the hook. And
wow.
So people are looking for answers and new innovations in medicine. We have a show called Innovations in Medicine, and we put a lot of new things on there. We just won 7 national, international awards for a show called marijuana, medical marijuana, and people are fascinated by that. And the award people are fascinated by it. They give us awards for it. So there's other interests other than just heart disease or cancer or brain cancer or, that sort of thing. So those are always the hot topics.
Huh. And it seems like you've got a multiplicity of channels. It's not just
Yes.
the American Health Journal
Well,
anymore.
it's because of the interest. It's because of people's interest. The American Health Journal is more Western medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It's your straight Western medicine. There's 500. Then we have another channel called Better Health, and that has about 200 videos so far, plus live streaming of 30-minute television shows. But that's more of the alternative medicine and complementary care, wellness, and a little away from Western medicine. So you see things on there like hypnosis for stopping smoking, cannabis, a lot of stuff on cannabis, wellness in your brain, just getting a better attitude, anti-suicide videos on teen suicide, things like that. A little away from the Western medicine that we offer on American Health Journal.
Mm.
And we have a third one, premiering in September 15th, is a show called Health for All. And Health for All is going to focus on health and the wellness of people of color with their special concerns in the areas of, like, for instance, diabetes and heart disease and lifestyle and diets. And that's delivered by doctors, medical professionals who are diverse and are people of color. So we don't know how that's going to go, but we certainly are very optimistic that we will build an audience there. We're starting off with over 120 videos, and we'll see how it goes. It premieres on September the 15th, and it's called Health for All.
And people can sign, for people who are not really familiar with streaming, they can sign into the channel and they can either watch a show live or they can pick some of the videos that you've recorded.
That's correct. And you can find us on, if you get any one of the platforms like Roku or Amazon Fire or Apple TV, we're on there. We're not on Apple TV, and one of our streaming channels we aren't there not on there yet. But we are on Roku. On all of our channels are on Roku, which is the largest platform.
And do they have commercials, or is it how does this kind of platform work? Like PBS doesn't have commercials, right?
That they don't, and we had to monetize some of our content. It's been, we have great underwriters that help us promote the show, but we wanted to really monetize our stuff, all of our content. So what we do is we offer a hospital, for instance, or anyone who is interested in coming on the channel. They come on the channel, and we buy a chunk of impressions, Google impressions, over 25,000 a month, and we put up a billboard ad on our channel. And those people come to the billboard ad, they see it, and they're interested in birthing centers, or, we have a birthing center on there from Pomona Valley Hospital that does very well, very, very well each month. And they hit on it, watch live, and they go directly to that. And that's another way of getting our content out to the public. And it's very reasonable. It's a flat cost each month, and it's very reasonable for someone to come on, get 25,000 impressions of their video, and we can do it in any market. For instance, like PBS, it's difficult because we're everywhere. So we're in Reno, we're in Denver, we're in Dallas. But here we can concentrate the advertising dollar to whatever market that person wants. So, for instance, if you're on Roku in New Orleans and you have a New Orleans hospital, we can direct everyone that's on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV to your ad directly right into that market.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's a way for people who are in the medical businesses to publicize what they're doing at public relations, and also to inform a larger public about their availability. Is that
yes, and very directly and very inexpensively.
so? It's a really great way to. I'm sure it's a bargain relative to some of the other ads that maybe aren't as targeted or don't have the reach that you do.
Right. So it's been working very well. We've been on for over a year with American Health Journal, and it's very successful. It's very successful. Everybody that signs up for 6 months resigns again, and we've been getting great numbers, and people have been very happy.
Great,
and we're happy because we're making money, from what we're doing, and that's important here to continue going out and interviewing doctors and hunting up stories on new and innovative things that are happening in medicine. That, no matter how wonderful that is, it takes money to do that, and this is another profit center that we can do and direct it to gathering that kind of information.
Well, when you started this, is this sort of, did you ever envision that it would end up on this kind of platform?
Not in a million years. Not in a million years. It began as an accident. It just became an accident. We did a good job, I believe, of gathering the information, making it simple for the public to understand. And I don't allow doctors to use any medical terms.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as they go into a medical term, I basically just say, what does that mean? And I give them a speech before they start the interview that don't lose anybody in this interview. Talk to me like you would talk to a patient. And I think that's a success of the show.
So what are some of the fun things people can learn on your programming? Like when you talk to doctors, what are some of the interesting things about feed?
There's some really interesting ones. A lot of the new things, for instance, are come from, for instance, from the cannabis area, because
mm-hmm.
that's changing every day.
Mm-hmm.
But the uses for the stuff is just unbelievable. There was I was interviewing a doctor, a Chinese doctor he flew up from San Diego, and we were interviewing him, and he had a salve, and it was some magic potion that had cannabis in it. Well, I took it all in mine, and he gave me a sample like everyone does, and I took it home, and my wife has a rash on the inside of her wrist, and she's been putting all this Western medicine on it, and it takes it away, but then it always comes back. And so I gave it to her, and after a couple of good, strong arguments of why she should do it, she did it. It's gone. The rash went away, and it's never come back.
Oh, wow.
But there's just the unknown. We just don't know where that is really going. And I interviewed a hypnotist who helps people with their food intake and their smoking, and that works.
Mm-hmm.
The whole vaping thing came on innocently, and I watched that change little by little until it became something dangerous. So we did very positive stories in the beginning, and then at the end of the cycle, the news cycle, then we started to not do. In fact, we wouldn't do any at all on vaping. But doctors were actually prescribing it to a way of quitting the smoke. This is an innocent way of quitting smoking. So, yeah, there's been a lot of interesting, and then a lot of great inventions. We've done the Salk Institute, where they were working on, and still are working on, growing limbs.
Wow.
Yeah, fascinating. And you walk into an aquarium with 1 million fish that they're working on, and their scientists are working on. But Yeah, I went all in my marijuana special that we did. We went to Princeton University to see a doctor doing experiments, experimental drugs on a person who has Parkinson's, very severe Parkinson's. And I saw pictures of her. She was sitting in a wheelchair, uncontrollably sitting in a wheelchair, blowing out a candle on a birthday cake. So when she was the guest, and we flew to Princeton, into New Haven, and her mother brought her to there, I made a lot of room in the room for her wheelchair. So the door opened, this woman comes in and says, "Hi, I'm Mary. Where do I sit?" And I went, "Who are you?" And he goes, "I'm Mary." I go, "Mary should be in a wheelchair, shaking." Well, she goes, "I don't do that anymore."
Well, good
and
for
she
her.
Sat down and she says, "I'm learning how to drive and I have a job." She was 30 years old. She had none of those things. And I have the interview, and I can tell you that she doesn't even stutter.
Amazing.
And it was all done with cannabis. So that has been, one of the big things. And of course, diagnosis. There's so many wonderful machines coming out that get deeper, and you can see the cancer. You can even see the cancer forming before it really becomes an issue. And that's technology more than doctors. Those are things given to doctors to use, but that's coming from people like Stryker and Astro, and they're the ones working on great medical devices.
And that's changing healthcare for sure.
Oh, it is. It is absolutely changing the face of healthcare, because it's changing what doctors are thinking. Because what doctors think and what doctors believe and what doctors learn is how we get our medical. We can't check into a hospital. People always say to me, "Well, you have this hospital in Nebraska, and how many patients are around that hospital in Nebraska?" And I say, it doesn't matter how many patients there are in Nebraska. That hospital only has 125 possible profit centers. They only have 125 customers, because 125 customers are their doctors. And those people pick up the phone and send the patient to the hospital. You can't walk into a hospital, sit down in the admitting desk and say, "I think I have cancer. Can I get admitted?" So you're not a customer to the hospital. You're just a patient of the doctors. So that's where all of medical science and medical technology filters through is the physician.
So it's important that physicians be aware of what's going on as well. So, not everybody has access to that.
They take a lot of time out of their day to prop up their education every day. That's why they call it a medical practice. They're practicing every day, and they're making sure that they have the latest news. And the ones that have to learn the most are the general practitioner, because that door opens and God knows what you have in front of you. You don't know. It could be anything from cancer to a cold. And the nephrologist or the kidney specialist or the orthopedic guy, he knows what he's dealing with. He's been already sent a bad back or a poor kidney. So he can his knowledge is very narrowed. He knows all about the kidney or all about the back. So he's got those two physicians are in good shape. It's the family medicine. The general practitioner is the one who has to hone up every single day on new treatments, new diagnosis, new ways of treating people.
But the internet has changed people's lives too, because they're now they have the ability now to research what's wrong with them. They can look up their symptoms and see what's
and bad. That's good and bad. People are self-diagnosing themselves, and if you have a sore toe and you type in sore toe, it'll give you 5 or 6 different options of why you have a sore toe. That's an easy one. But when someone says, I'm sweating at night and I don't feel good, and they give you some diagnosis, you pump in some symptoms, they pump out, but in 6 months, you all of a sudden are getting worse. You should have seen the doctor. You were self-diagnosing yourself, and you've got to be careful. Those things that you see on websites where it says symptoms, and you go in there, that's a hit and miss type situation, and very, very dangerous.
So my question for you is, when somebody gets in that situation and they're self-diagnosing, couldn't they access your programming to learn more about some of the topics that they've looked at?
Yes, they can. And at the end of it all, I would say, I hope you're completely informed, and I hope you understand where some of these symptoms are coming from. Now, pick up the phone and call your doctor.
So it gives this is an opportunity to do research as well as learn about healthcare on a daily basis.
Did you say research?
Yeah, because people who are thinking about, they've been told they have something. If you have a program on it, it gives them, a little bit more information than they might have gotten from the doctor in an accessible way.
That is where it's really, really good. That's a great way of using the internet. You go in, and the doctor says you have a colon polyp, which was picked up in the test. You can go home and get on your computer and find out more about colon polyps than you ever need to know. But you find out that it's okay, that it's something that's treatable, what you have to do. It'll even tell you what to eat so you don't get another polyp. So the doctor probably didn't go into the nutrition of it with you, but the internet would. So that's where the internet really works very well, is after you've had a diagnosis and you want to know. And it sometimes it really helps a family member, because they come home and they've found out that there's something wrong with one of their eyes, their husband's eye, and she goes and she sits down and starts going through trying to find and describe the problem that her husband has, and finds out that it's treatable and that these people have been cured of it, and it takes a lot of anxiety away from people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gives you access to something that gives you a level of comfort.
Exactly.
So what do you see in the next 5 years? What do you see the big innovations being in medicine? Marijuana is one you mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
What else do you see?
That's happening every single day. I think you're going to see more in diagnosis. I think you're going to see more cancer diagnosis early on. Cancer diagnosis. You're going to start, I think, in 5 years, and I predict that in 5 years, they're going to have a handle on cancer. There are several large universities and organizations that are working on a great cure for cancer. A vaccine, I'm not sure of, but at least new treatments for cancer, even at late stages, are going to be around in 5 years. And diagnostic tools are going to be around. I think we're going to have smaller hospitals. I think we're going to have more community hospitals rather than these big 600, 700 bed plants that are around. I don't see anybody building any more of those. And I think that healthcare is going to be a lot more accessible through, as they call them, doc in the box, little urgent care places. And there is a firm, and I'm searching for the name, but they are starting small little mini hospitals that act as an emergency room. They're in Texas. They're in 5 or 6. They're even in Lake Charles, and they're in Houston. And what do is you go into it. It's basically a fully armed emergency room, and it has maybe 10 or 15 beds. So if something were to where they needed you overnight, they could do that before they either let you on to your other hospital or they sent you home. So I think there's going to be more and more of that. I think there's going to be a lot more of that.
Do you think, what's going to happen with COVID? How do you think that's going to play out?
You know, I've been in the middle of this with all the things that we do, and I think that Dr. Fauci said something at a news conference, like the first or second news conference, and some reporter said to him, "When is this going to be over?"
Mm-hmm.
You know what he said? He said, "When we have a vaccine." And I think he was right. The mask is a wonderful thing. It cuts it down. We're seeing some new numbers that we haven't seen before that are coming out that show that it's not as severe as we thought it was and who it was attacking. But those numbers are going to be out in the next 2 weeks. I think they're going to be very surprising to people. This is not as deadly to a healthy person as it seems to be. But the vaccine, I'm thinking we're going to start seeing in November, December, and then we're going to see more and more of it. I've already had stories pitched to me about people who are forming companies to distribute, already forming big companies to distribute the vaccine to as many people and as quickly as anyone as they can. But once we have that, then you're going to see that through 2021, you'll start seeing the coronavirus slowing down considerably. Once we get to the older folks and we get into convalescent hospitals and things like that, and we start in getting people immune to all that, we're going to be in a much better shape. Right now, we have to stay with the mask, and we have to do the best we can.
Do you think there's going to be another wave with a different virus, or do you think we will have learned from this experience so that if it happens again?
I can tell you one thing for sure. It's the most valuable lesson that we have learned is remember when we're watching TV and we're watching something in Japan and everybody comes out of up the escalator and they're all wearing masks and we always thought how silly that was? That's not silly anymore. I think the minute that someone announces that there's a new virus coming, everyone, including me, is going to the mask. And I think that's one of the ways we're going to do it. But is there going to be a new virus? Of course there is. But I think we're going to control it a lot better. We don't want to sit at home again for 6 or 7 or 8 weeks again ever. I know I don't. And if it means wearing a mask right away, I have no problem with it.
I've been reading where because a lot of people have lost their jobs, that so corporations are not paying insurance premiums as much as they used to, that insurance costs are going to go up next year, up to about 30% over this year. Do you think that's going to impact care, or do you think how do you think that's going to change things?
I don't know. I know that if someone is ill and they need a doctor, this country is very good at seeing them. They're not going to sit on the lawn outside of the doctor's office or the hospital and die there in the grass. That's just not going to happen. They're going to see a doctor. Somewhere, somehow, public medicine takes care of everyone. And it's that part of it's not going to change. Now, whether or not insurance is going to go up, I don't know. I really, really don't know. I'd like to see what the numbers have been in the last 6 months for new diseases, new heart disease, new cancers that have been discovered by doctors, because doctors have not been able to really see patients very much. And patients are reluctant to go to the doctor because they think there's a waiting room full of people who have coronavirus. So they don't go, and so that has slowed down dramatically. What are those numbers? That I think we're waiting for. I think that's where you're waiting for those numbers to come up and see how if there has been a real increase in things, or the things that a lot of people do, they go to the doctor and it's nothing. You know what I mean? And
right.
There's been a lot less visits to the doctor, which means for insurance companies a lot less price.
That's true.
They're not paying the doctors as much because there aren't as many visits. So
that's true.
That might offset any kind of increase that there would be.
Right, but it also
Hopefully.
means kicking down the road what could have been a serious problem, which means the cost goes up for taking care of it.
Yeah, costs are going to go up. It's just they're not. Let me put it this way: they're not going to go down. So
interesting.
They're not going to go down. So the prices, all it means to us is the increase in healthcare. Is it going to be 2% over 2 years? Is it going to be 7% over 2 years? What is going to be that? What's going to be that increase? And then the companies that want the business, that are looking for the business, are going to try. This is America. People are competitive. They're going to try to hold the price down. Those companies that start bringing the prices up are going to start losing business, and definitely they're going to lose their corporate business.
Yeah, interesting. So you see insurance not increasing because we're sort of reaching a tipping point on affordability.
I think it's going to increase, but I don't think it's going to be anything dramatic.
So do you see any significant changes in healthcare delivery other than the smaller hospitals? Do you see a shift back to having access to a local physician that really knows them, or do you see people sort of
that's not ever going to change because the patient demands it. The patient does, especially older patients, and those are the people that see the doctor the most, do not want to sit in their den in front of a screen talking to their doctor through a screen. That's
right. That's true.
First of all, it's the technology they don't like, and the second is they can't look into their doctor's eyes. I think you're going to have telemedicine. I think you're going to have it for like younger people. I think where it's really going to blow up, really get big, is in pediatrics. That mom that has that kid that has that fever upstairs, she gets on the computer in the den and starts talking about the problems that little Timmy is having or something. Those are the things that can be done with a prescription over the phone or over Zoom. I think that's where it's going to grow. But someone who's having a hard time breathing if they're going up the steps, no, they're not going to do that on a screen.
And the other thing is that, you can't, there's no contact. So the doctor can't really, the resolution hasn't gotten to the point where the doctor could really see the skin to see how dry it is or touch them or, the visual cues that they normally look for in an appointment. That also makes a difference.
It really does, and you have to understand. I live in a doctor's world. I speak to doctors every day, and they're I have to tell you, they're a little reluctant to do this all the time. A doctor miscalculates someone's problem, and they make a small mistake in their diagnosis and end up having to give you 5 more milligrams or 6 milligrams. There's always adjustments and things, but now you're putting that over the internet. Everyone's so worried about privacy, but yet you're getting on a screen and you're talking about your most intimate medical concerns,
right?
And you're sending them on the airways.
Right.
And the doctor's recording this. He's taking guesses.
Right.
And 6 months later, some lawyer calls him on the phone and says, "You told her she had this?" And he says, "Yeah, but I never got to see her." And so now they're a little nervous about doing that. They're a little nervous about giving a straight diagnosis without more testing. And, that there is one thing where, you're looking for an increase. That's where the increase is going to come from, is all these tests that are being done, because doctors are so concerned that they're going to make a mistake on the screen.
Right. And the cost of sending it to people and sending it back, that also increases the price.
Exactly. And most of the time, you can't draw blood yourself. So you're going to end up going to a lab. There's no other way. So there's, if a doctor needs, a full lab layout, and where, when you go into there and they take 5 vials of blood, that's a full scan, and you're not going to do that at home. You have, you can do the colonoscopy thing at home, with that, but you're not going to draw 5 draws of blood.
That's true.
You end up having, and blood tests are the biggest thing there is. So you're going to end up in a lab somewhere.
So interesting. So I think that there's the pendulum is going to swing, I think you're right. The pendulum's going to swing sort of back to where people will feel more comfortable going back to the doctor's office as the fear of COVID recedes.
The fear of COVID recedes. It's the real numbers come out. The real numbers come out. Who really gets this? Who really dies? How quickly does it do? And who really had the virus and who didn't? When the numbers really come out, there's no way that the numbers are here today, because you have to go through medical examiners and doctors and insurance papers. And by the time someone really starts doing this, and they will do it because insurance companies want to know what their risk is. So they're going to get the real numbers, and we will get those numbers. And when those numbers come out, then the mask goes away. We start walking. We start going to a restaurant. We start going to the movies again, and we start visiting the doctor again.
So and then things sort of, do they go back to normal, or is there a new normal?
There's a little new normal, but I think the new normal is going to be what happens if this happens again. This thing pops up again, and there's the new bird virus or the new dog virus or whatever they want to call it. And it pops up, and then everyone goes to the mask, and people start slowing down going to the restaurant, and people don't go to big crowds. If there's also another breakout in maybe a year or 2 years, people will go to the mask, and people probably big operations like Coachella, big music concerts and that sort of thing will probably cancel or postpone. But I think that's going to be the new normal of how we treat this when it rears its ugly head again.
And do you think people that, you were talking about a change in how people consume media, that they're disconnecting and they're getting media on these channels like Roku and things like that? Do you see that?
It's cost. It's cost. It's not. They're not going to it to get far superior entertainment, or a lot of the stuff on streaming is not live. But Netflix owns a lot of the stuff now. They're a tough competitor. And it just, when you go to favorite channels, there was an article yesterday in yesterday's NAB, National Association multi-channel newspaper, that was saying that of the 10 top channels, the favorite channels, networks that people watch, CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox, CNN are not on the list.
Really?
No. It's the Animal Planet and Discovery and the History Channel. And the only one on there was PBS. PBS was on there. And those are the favorite channels that people like to, I'm like everyone else. I've discovered a show that I watch called Zoo, and it's about the attendants at a zoo taking care of zoo animals, and
Wow.
it's fascinating. You're watching a rhino get a shot. It's just interesting. It's not your regular,
Yeah.
things that you get on TV. So, and there's so many. I mean, when I was a kid, and that was a very, very long time ago, there were 15 or 16 channels in LA.
Mm.
A friend of mine in Beverly Hills has 544 channels.
Jeez, that's a
Now,
lot.
how are you going to watch or ever see 500 channels? I mean, how do you get, when I was around as a kid, ABC or CBS or NBC, if they got a third of the audience or 25% of the audience, that was huge. You take 500 channels and divide that by the viewers. Nobody gets 1% or 2%.
Mm.
Very few get any at all. So, and do you think there's going to be less channels? No, there's going to be more. In fact, some friend of mine who is with Comcast in Philadelphia says that in 2 years there'll be 800 channels.
So somebody needs to use like your model. Otherwise, the channels won't be able to survive. They won't be able to afford content.
That's it. It's going to, the cord cutting is purely economical. Cord cutting is purely, I mean, especially when this happened, the demand for watching TV was higher because you were stuck at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't have a job. So where were you doing that? Where could you do this cheaply? You go to Roku. You'd go to the store, you buy a machine that costs between $30 and $100, depending on the level that you want. But you
Mm-hmm.
can get Roku for $50. And you go home, you plug it into your TV, and there's more stuff to watch on Roku than you can possibly ever imagine.
Right. But then how does content get paid for? Right? I mean, how does that work then? Because that's new.
Roku makes its money off of advertising of people who do want to advertise on channel.
Mm-hmm.
They sell impressions. They sell machines, and then they sell programming. People come on that want their show to be on Roku, and they pay to do that. So Roku makes an enormous amount of money, but they don't make it on subscribing every month, which is what people are trying to get away from because they can't afford it.
Right.
And, I mean, cable TV is expensive. I mean, I remember when first cable came out, it was $20. I still have cable because I monitor just about everything I possibly can. And my cable bill is $150 a month.
Wow. That's a big difference.
It is a big difference, and now they're trying to hold the cost down. Comcast and those people are trying, Time Warner and Viacom and all these people that are around, Spectrum, they're trying to hold the prices down because every time they have a major increase or a bump, you have no idea. They lose so many subscribers. It's unbelievable. And the first thing you try to do when you're trying to cut your expenses, that's one place you can do it if there's an alternative. And Roku and Apple TV and Amazon Fire, those are all alternatives. You can just take one for the other. So
right, and people aren't wedded to Walter Cronkite. They don't have to watch that CBS
those days
evening news.
Yeah, those days are gone. And
celebrities aren't the same either because with a few exceptions, there are so many.
And they're, and they come and go. I am a Hollywood brat. I was raised in Hollywood, California.
Uh-huh.
And I went to Hollywood High School. And
wow.
I have and all my friends grew up to be movie stars, a lot of them. And I grew up in the business. My father was in the business, the movie business. So we grew up in that atmosphere. And actors used to be very important. They'd smoke a cigarette in a magazine, and the cigarette sales would go up. Well, that just doesn't work like it used to anymore. And actors move a lot quicker. There's an old saying in Hollywood, there's 3 stages of an actor. They said, get Gregory Peck. The second one is get me a Gregory Peck lookalike. And the third phase is, who is Gregory Peck? So it moves very quickly. So before you know it, they're here and they're gone. So no, celebrities are not as important.
So interesting. We've sort of devalued them as we sort of had this influencer movement.
Yeah,
it's taken away.
They've gotten very political. They have gotten very, very political. And when Brad Pitt or someone comes out and says that he's against, some kind of environmental thing, and some company that's, half the folks are thinking he's a wonderful guy, and the other half of the folks think he's terrible and never want to go to another movie he does. So you're better off just keeping your mouth shut.
Right.
Politically.
Right. Controversy doesn't.
I think what's wonderful is when these people come out and say, I've suffered from breast cancer, or I have prostate cancer, or I have had this problem or that problem, and there's hope. See your doctor. That's wonderful. There's a celebrity awareness that brings people to the doctor, and that's great.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, people want to reach out to all these amazing. Oh, so one last question, and then what's next? So you have these 3. You have these 3 channels you're launching. You certainly are a visionary, so you're looking to the future. What do you see as next for you?
I would like to begin to do documentaries. I did two recent documentaries, medical documentaries, and I would like to expand the growth of our 3 channels. And right now we're going to keep it to 3 channels. The growth of that's going to be a full-time job for us over the next year or so. And then we continue with our PBS show, our national PBS show. But I think what I'd like to do is to be able to take a hospital in Missouri and to do a documentary on a hospital in Missouri, or a country doctor in Montana, and bring some interesting medical stories to the public. We definitely have an outlet for it. We have distribution for it. It's just a matter of finding people who are interesting, that have a story to tell, and that after the lights come up and the show's over, people learn something about medicine.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. Well, if people want to watch your shows or reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, if you go to Roku or any of the other channels, you just type in American Health Journal, and that'll give you a good start. And you'll be right there, and you'll see a lot of things you haven't seen before in medicine. Same thing with Better Health, but mostly American Health Journal on Roku or Amazon or Apple TV. That'll get you going. Look in your local TV guide, on screen or off screen, and see if our show is in your market on PBS. We're in a lot of different markets, and we have a brand new 13-week series that we just sent on the NIDA satellite that will hit every market in the United States. So just look at, as they say, time and channel. Let's see where we are. And, of course, there's our website, which is ahj@thedoctorshow.com. And that's huge. That sort of just gives you everything. There's television shows, and there's hundreds of TV shows there. There's segments, health segments, tips, all kinds of stuff there. And then actually there's an area there where you can see all of our content. If you go there, there's a PDF of all of our content, and all of our doctors and things. And so, if nothing else, the website gets you going.
Well, Roland Perez, it's been a pleasure. You've built the Windsor Broadcasting Productions into something really remarkable. And American Health Journal is just a fabulous, fabulous show. So, and I appreciate everything you've done to inform us about healthcare. Thank you.
And thank you for being there to get people on like me and get it out to the public. Without you, there wouldn't be anybody.
This is Minda Wilson for Urgent Care.